Hey folks, Seth Liebson here. As we watch cities burn, statues being torn down, and calls to defund the police, if you haven't already, it may be time to think about personal protection. Guns Etc. has 10,200 square feet of guns, ammo, safes, and a staff that will work with you to find the best firearm for your situation. So stop by their huge store in Mesa or click on gunsetc.com and have access to over $400 million in firearms and accessories. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back and happy August 13th, 2020. As I've been saying in writing, a lot of traditional school parents, not all, have learned of late what homeschooling parents have known for years. They can do fine on their own, thank you very much. There are a lot of great curricula out there, some not, so one has to be careful. But I was thinking what it might be like if we developed our own homeschooling, or we could call it Patriot curriculum. Of course, to put it all here in this monologue, in every grade from elementary through secondary would be Sisyphean, but might we look at and think about the contours? Some years ago, former Reagan Education Secretary William Bennett put it this way: "We say that we want to encourage virtue and honor among the young, but it has become a mark of sophistication to shun the language of morality. We desperately need to recover a sense of the fundamental purpose of education, which is to provide for the intellectual and moral education of the young." From the ancient Greeks to the founding fathers, moral instruction was the central task of education. If you ask what is the good of education, Plato said, the answer is easy: that education makes good men, and that good men act nobly. Jefferson believed that education should aim at improving one's morale and faculties. And of education, John Locke said, "'Tis virtue that we aim at, hard virtue, and not the subtle arts of shifting." Indeed, what we come to remember is that all true education is the architecture of the soul, child's soul. You look at some of the curricula around these days, is that what you're paying for? If in a government school, we spend about $13,000 on average per pupil in the United States, can we not do better than 66% of our 8th graders reading below a proficient level with that kind of money? Can we not do better than 66% of our 8th graders performing below the proficiency level of math with that kind of money? 43% of our high school seniors read below a proficient level with that kind of money. Couldn't we do better than that? 50% of our high school seniors achieve an F in American history. Couldn't we do better with that kind of money? I mean, for about another $1,000 than we spend on the average per pupil in the United States, you could send your child to a high school like Brophy College Prep, where 99% of the students are admitted to a four-year college after graduation. Let's take a look at the curriculum Hillsdale offers for high school students, and you answer me two questions. Do your children now get anything like this? And if not, why not? Should they not? In their senior year of high school, they would read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and one of these books, Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, Silas Mariner by George Eliot, Lord of the Flies by William Golding, Thomas Hardy, Victor Hugo, Chaim Potok, and Leo Tolstoy. By the time they even got to high school, they will have read Mark Twain, Shakespeare, Hemingway, and To Kill a Mockingbird, among other books. One might have extra fun and think about what Jefferson read. Authors like Herodotus, Plato, and when we think about and of what we teach our children ourselves, let us keep in mind what Jefferson once wrote to John Adams. "I have given up newspapers in exchange for Tacitus and Thucydides, for Newton and Euclid, and I find myself much the happier." A point on this, if I may. When I was a left-wing undergraduate before my political and philosophical conversion, I used to think facts about current events mattered. If I knew more contemporary facts about, say, Nicaragua and the history of, say, 1978 to 1987, I would be an expert on Central America and U.S. foreign policy. Boy, did I learn I was wrong. Jefferson was right. Unless I had a better understanding of Marx and Lenin and Jefferson and Madison, I knew almost nothing about the why of American foreign policy. Anyone can know about the what. It's the why that matters. How did John Adams put it to his wife Abigail? The science of government it is my duty to study more than all the other sciences. The arts of legislation and administration and negotiation ought to take the place of, indeed exclude in a manner, all other arts. I must study politics and war that our sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. Our sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history and naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain. Well, we all study painting and poetry now, don't we? And we have no longer a basis in math or philosophy or the science of government, which we would call political philosophy. In fact, we might even go so far as to say we don't even study statuary anymore. We just tear statues down because we know no history or political philosophy. Now, I know what the immediate resistance to these kinds of curricula will be, and so do you. It's not diverse enough. Well, I ask in return, are you telling me the wisdom that spans from the works of Plato to Chaim Potok or George Eliot or Harper Lee is not diverse? For the sake of wisdom, which is what education is about, that's not diverse. I bet the first people to object to this kind of curriculum wouldn't even know that George Eliot is a woman. But this is a big point, diversity and knowledge. We will be told it's all too white. Fine. Let us use Thomas Sowell's textbook on economics and add the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass and other books of quality if that is the concern, but of quality should dictate, not of color or of country. You see, we are trying to teach and educate and build the mind and soul, not enhance the cones and rods in our children's eyes. That's the work of ophthalmologists and pediatricians. So a word about white education, so-called, if I may. Harry Jaffa asked it this way. Is there such a thing as white mathematics or white economics or white biology or white physics or, for that matter, white political science? Is there anything in Plato's Republic that indicates it is white justice that Socrates was seeking to define or discover? Is there anything in the Nicomachean Ethics to indicate that it is white happiness that Aristotle was seeking? Is there anything in Locke's second treatise on government or in the Declaration of Independence to indicate that taxation without representation was unjust only for whites? On and on. You may get the point. For what is true of knowledge and wisdom is also true of the virtues and proper behavior, and it transcends nonsense like race. As Dr. Bennett put it, do you have kids who like to have their lunch money stolen? Do you have girls who like to be grabbed against their will? Do you have boys who like to be bullied and beat up depending on their race or culture? Of course not. Think of it this way, as Harry Jaffa again put it. The evil of the past, whether of slavery or Jim Crow, was not evil because it was done by whites to blacks, but because it was done by some human beings to other human beings. We've lost sight of that. Things are now good or evil, good or bad to too many based on the color of the perpetrator and the color of the victim. What a wonderful world it would be if things were just good or bad or good or evil in their own right, on their own merits, and their own demerits. Then perhaps society could be as angry and animated about all crime, be it slavery in China or crime in the streets of America, and not excuse or wish it away or ignore it because it doesn't fit a color or cultural narrative. We'd have less crime and less slavery if we thought that way. That is, if the life or freedom of someone didn't depend on what color they were or what country they lived in. We used to call this by what it should be called, human rights, because of our condition and rights, natural, God-given rights for being a human being, not something else. Not something else with rights or power based on the conditions or geographies of our birth, but by the fact of our birth as human beings. Anyway, I digress. Edwin Delattre, someone I've been reading a lot of lately, former president of St. John's College, put it this way. Education cannot give everything by asking nothing. For if it asks nothing, demands nothing, stands for nothing, it has nothing left to give. The issue of what duties education does have is joined by Mortimer Adler and Milton Mayer in The Revolution in Education, where they write, education needs to know what it is doing and why, and to be aggressive about it. The keystone in the arch of our government, Jefferson called it. What the thinking of the past was able at its best to do for some, the thinking of the present must try to do for a society of all. And of course, the great danger here is to teach what is fashionable rather than to teach what is good. Well, who's to say what is good, we are asked or told. Dr. Delattre put it this way: on balance, if education settles for the right to opinions and neglects the instruction basic to reach opinions which are right, it will have settled for much less than half a loaf. The same considerations apply to the question, who is to say? The question masquerades as an implicit defense of tolerance of the views of others, but the masquerade deserves to be challenged. In fact, the question is a rhetorical device for bringing to a halt serious reflection about right and wrong conduct, practices, and policies. It amounts to a merciless attack on thinking itself, for it denies that considered views are better than unconsidered views, and it advocates abnegation of the responsibility to deliberate conscientiously before making decisions about how best to behave. Phrases such as these are the guardians and protectors of human vanity, not serious thought. In the end, let us, as we think about the curricula and teachers we want for our students, not lose sight of first principles. I refer here to a 35-year-old report called First Lessons. I think it still stands, though those around it have fallen. The principal goal of education is a strong foundation for further education, for democratic citizenship, and for eventual entry into responsible adulthood. Children do not just grow up. They must be raised by the community of adults and all adults. The community should accept as its solemn responsibility, as a covenant, the nurture, care, and education of its next generation. This, it seems to me, is the series or constitutes the contours of thinking we should all be engaged in as we rethink what the education of all our publics should be under the rubric of the phrase when we speak of public education. I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.